Missy Conboy from Notre Dame, Miechelle Willis from Ohio State, Cromer from Arkansas, and Heather Lyke from Eastern Michigan. We need Heather to focus on, and then the second one will be more for Missy and Miechelle. So you mentioned this intentional knowing where you want to go, which is something else we talk about. You know, sometimes we feel like we get lucky with jobs, and actually that's not how the universe works. We end up where we're supposed to be, but you get there quicker when you're intentional and know that. So how did you get to that point of knowing, and then how do you make the tough decisions to go get it? And then the next question.
Well, I would just say that, to what Julie said, I think it's a really good point. When Jean did ask me, I really had not, because I too did not get into business, like I have to be an athletic director. But when he did challenge me with the question, you do need to think about, okay, what would your true aspiration be? And then I thought, well, if I say I want to be an athletic director and I don't do it, am I a failure? So that was the risk that I, really wasn't sure. I was ready to say for sure I wanted to do it. And then I really talked to a couple of my colleagues that I work with at Ohio State, and there was a group of us, about a group of 5 or a group of 6 of us, and we kind of called ourselves a group of 6, just in quiet. And I went around to each different person that I thought really were aspiring to do very similar things. Ohio State's a very big organization, 330 people, and so the top senior associates, if there's 10 to 15 of them, who wants to do what, and how are you going to help one another? Because I don't know what your business is, but you might become really expertise in one area, but not get exposed to other areas of your organization. And so you want to make sure you have a breadth of understanding the entire organization if you're eventually going to lead it. So I went to a number of these guys and just said, look, do you want to be an athletic director too? Because if you do, let's help one another. Let's become colleagues instead of competitors. Because I don't know what your organization is like. It's going to be pretty competitive up there, right? Everybody's vying for the next leadership role or advancement or promotion or whatever it is within your company. So you think about the people you work with every day. Are you competing with them or are you colleagues with them? And how are you helping them? So I wanted to really intentionally help my colleagues, and I honestly wanted them to also help me, because I had some areas that I didn't have all the experience. And you can't get it sometimes. They're not going to also put me in charge of development or put me in charge of ticket sales, because it's just too complex of an organization. But I want to have some exposure to it, just like they wanted to have exposure to my areas. So that's one thing I would just say, really, I was very intentional about becoming colleagues with the people I work with as opposed to competitors.
So great takeaways, and we actually have a little handout that has some of these takeaways on the back, but I want to just echo again something that they both mentioned, is surrounding yourself with truth tellers, and every one of you probably came here tonight with a friend or you know someone, and I encourage you to go back and ask them what they want to do, where do they want to be, and then support them in that. Because wouldn't you appreciate that support back? And as women, we really have to do that. That's really a huge foundation of what NACWA is about, trying to provide that on a day-to-day basis. But they all got it from different places. Voicing your dreams is really, really important.
So something else on that note, I think that's good. The other thing is, I have a lot of young women who come into want to meet with me, and I want to be your job. And I, to a person, will say, why don't you try to be his job? Meaning the person that I report to. We all report to somebody. Heather leads a department, but she reports to somebody. We all report. And I'm always surprised. Rarely will at least younger women say something along the lines of, "Oh, well, I'm going to go meet with him too." Nobody ever says that. It's just look like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that, or I didn't imagine that for myself." So I think it's important for us to work with our friends and those we know and do exactly what you said. But it's also important when those young women come to you and they ask this question and they really don't know how or where to start, let's start there with resetting their expectation for themselves rather than, I have a great job. I have a great, great, great job, and I love it. But I want them to aspire to be, wherever I am going as well, and not a rung or two down.
Amen. Sister Heather and Julie have been very intentional about taking steps to get the experience they need to do this and that, to get in certain positions. Missy and Miechelle have done the same thing, but they were able to get experiences they need in the same place. They've both been at their places for over 20 years now, right? So talk a little bit about those decisions. So there's some people that have to get different jobs to get experiences, to grow, and you feel like you were able to do that in the same place. So talk about maybe some of the decisions you made. Yeah.
Well, so one of my takeaways was no FOMO, no fear of missing out. And my oldest daughter, who's a senior at Notre Dame, we always said when she was growing up that she had an FMS, fear of missing something, and then later somebody much smarter than me, quantified it as FOMO instead. And I think I have it a little bit too. And I think when you've been at an institution for, in my case, 29 years, you have opportunities to see what your colleagues have done through the years. For example, the people I started with at the NCAA are conference commissioners and athletic directors and are big leadership positions throughout the country. And then people I've worked with at Notre Dame, the athletic director of Stanford, the athletic director of Northwestern, at Penn State, former AD at Cal, the athletic director of North Carolina, athletic director of Georgia Tech, athletic director of Duke, all work with me. So you look at those individuals and you have a tendency to think, well, what's wrong with me? But the big thing I would say is that as you consider moves in your career, you don't only want to look at what's the right job. You want to look at what's the right time. And with my no FOMO comment was really think about who might apply for your job if you were to leave, and before you decide, don't go for the head. Go for a job you want, don't go for the headline, because the headline is fleeting. Every day we get something called the D1 ticker. I don't know if those of you in athletics are familiar with it, but it used to be that little transaction section in USA Today where you say, oh, so-and-so went there. But now every single promotion, every single AD opening or SWA opening or whatever it might be is broadcast across the country into everybody's inbox every single day. So it's really easy to say, oh my gosh, everybody's moving. Why aren't I moving? And then you have to step back and think, okay, what do I love about my job? Who would apply for my job if I left? And make sure that you're ready. The last thing I would say is that if you move into a position that you're not ready for, or if you move into a position where the support system in that position isn't ready to make the changes that they need to make to be successful, you could be back out in 3 to 5 years looking to re-enter the industry. So you want to be careful, and it's not only the job, but it's the time.
Let me stay fresh. 21 years at Ohio State is that the change in leadership. And when I went to Ohio State, I never thought that I would be there more than 10 years. And I'm now there 21 years. Well, in between, about midway through there, we had a director change. And it was really like starting a new job because there's new leadership and a new management style and leadership style, and you get used to that. But I never really, I was never one of those types of people that was always looking for the next job. Yeah, I really am, when I say a grinder, my approach has always been, how can I improve the experience for the student athlete tomorrow, today, and work really hard on being the best at the time associate athletics director that I can be, in the senior associate director that I can be, and now the deputy athletic director I can be. What can I do every day to make a better administrator, manager, leader in my organization? And so I've a lot of my energy is targeted towards doing the best that I can do.
And you said something great, both of you did. All of you mentioned this, and it's such a great message that you have to be really, really good at your job. Really good. And when you're good, you actually get the opportunity to take more on. But voicing, Miechelle, I'm so glad you stepped up and said, hey, what about me? Because you were doing it, which is great. The first part was on Rockstars. How did they become Rockstars? These women are superstars in their, not only in the industry, but at their institutions. And you heard a little bit about their tips of how they got there, how they became Rockstars. And hopefully, no matter your industry, you can relate to that. Many of you are mid-career and you're becoming rock stars. So just tell us quickly, maybe one thing. You now have teams under you. You are developing rock stars. What's the one key thing that you are doing, or what's the one message you would tell the younger people in the group that are aspiring to be rock stars, whether in their industry or outside?
What I would say is, just this past week, we go through an exercise every year called kind of a talent update. And it's university-wide, but we are asked to identify those people who we say are the next leaders in the organization, to have the ability to move outside their current scope of influence and lead a larger department. And then we need to identify what those things they need to work on are, and then we have to identify a plan for how we're going to get them there in a certain time frame. And then as part of that exercise, we also have to talk about sustained high performers, who, if they left, would leave a hole in our organization.
That I would recommend is if you don't get an annual review, ask for one. Because the only way that you can determine how you're doing in the job you're doing is to have that formal feedback. They're difficult, sometimes very painful, but at least you get to calibrate and understand what your leader is expecting of your performance, out of you, and those things that you need to work on. The emotional IQ gene is huge on emotional IQ, and it is huge. Someone had said it earlier. You need to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and how those match with your organization or the organization that you're going to pursue. Super.
Well, my usual answer to that question is to remind everyone how important it is to be intentional, which we talked about, to be exceptional in the role that you're in, which we talked about, and to be known, which I know you preach all the time. So I'll go to my B answer, which is probably a little bit more hands-on, and that is I encourage everyone to make decisions. And that may seem like a relatively simple or straightforward thing, but it doesn't matter if you're an intern or it doesn't matter if you're, the vice president or director of athletics. Practice in making decisions and practice in knowing the landscape and the decision that you're making, and practice in dealing with what the outcome is.
I'll wrap it up. I would say that one piece of advice that has stuck with me for a really long time, when I was working at the University of Cincinnati and Bob came in after the AD was fired, one of the things that he told us, there was a lot of criticism of that chair, the athletic director chair, so the boss, the CEO, the head of the organization. There was a lot of criticism of that particular person previously and all the decisions that were being made. So when he came in, he was very attuned to the culture and realizing that people were sort of continuing to criticize or were spending their time. And he's told us, don't criticize the person that is above you. If you want that job and you think that athletic director job, or you think that CEO or that vice president or that president job is that easy, then go get that job. So as a leader, as someone who's aspiring to be at the very top, support the person above you.
Hopefully you all have picked up at least one thing that you can take away as far as you becoming a rock star, being the best you can be, and one thing you can take away to help develop others. And we could talk about this forever, and this is what we do in our programs. We dig deep on this stuff, but this gives you a general idea. Applause for our panel.